Okay, so we're going to talk about user testing. And so when we're creating a game or really any type of interactive work, user testing is a very important part of the process. This is sort of different than if you're, making a painting or making a song or something like that. If you're making a painting, people might have different impressions of the meaning or the aesthetic value of that painting, but people know that if it's a painting, it's sitting on the wall, you just look at it. There's no instructions, there's no testing required in that sense. In games, it's a little bit different because people interact with games. And so we need to know, it's much more important that we know that people can play the game before we release the game. And so when you're building the game on your own, of course you're going to play and you're going to test it, so you'll have some sense. But what you'll find when other people play it is that things that seem sort of simple or normal or obvious to you are not that way to your users, because you created the game, you understand the logic of the game, you've probably played it 100 times. Somebody who's playing it for the first time is not necessarily going to understand all of the things that you understand about the game. So it's very important to start user testing early in the process. If you talk to any, game design studio or, game developer, they will tell you this. It's really, you really want to start early on, and you want to have good sort of approach to testing. So we want to have users, and we want to ask good questions so that we can get good feedback from those users. So when we start to figure out what those questions are, and actually I'm going to go ahead and just create a Google form. So the way that I'm going to do this is using Google Forms, just because it's pretty easy and free. I assume that most of you guys have a Gmail, and if you have a Gmail, you can make a form. If you don't, you can create one. It should be relatively easy to do. So I'm going to go over here and go to forms.google.com. And you can see I've made lots of examples of user testing forms in previous semesters. I'm just going to start with a blank form, and I'll call this user testing MEA 300 spring 2024. And so when we're creating a user testing form, we basically have like different types of questions that we can ask. So if I want to make a question, I can have short answer, I can have long paragraph answer, multiple choice, check boxes, drop down, scale. There's all sorts of different types of questions that we can ask. And so we want to think about what questions we want to ask to get good feedback. And so what we want to do is think about what are the types of things that we need to know about the game. So the first thing we want to kind of think about is bugs versus play testing. So we want to make this distinction between bugs and things that are just confusing or unintended. So a bug is a problem with a game. A bug is like if there's clipping, like here where the dog is clipping through the door. This is not intended. This is not something the designer wanted to happen. This is a bug that's happening because it isn't set up right. That's different from playability or play testing bugs or problems. That's when you made a choice and you intended for something to happen the way it happens, but it's confusing or otherwise unenjoyable for the player. So we want to kind of distinguish between those two things first. So we can ask some questions about bugs. I'm going to kind of skip over that because our games are going to have bugs for now. We're not going to do like bug reporting and stuff like that. Maybe in a future second semester of this class we would do that. But let's just go right to onboarding. So the first thing we want to do, does the player understand how to move in the game? Does the player understand the basic controls and movement? So there's different ways that we can ask that. We can say yes or no, did you understand the controls? Or we can say, on a scale from 1 to 5, how easy was it to understand the controls? So either one is fine. I'm going to go with a yes or no for the first one. I'm going to say, were the controls easy to use? And so we'll say, and Google's actually making some suggestions. So let's say add these. And then I don't actually want maybe. gonna add other so they can type in whatever they want. And then you have a choice to make this required or not. So I'm gonna make this required because it's very important for me to know this. But I might follow up with another question. So this one I'll do like a short answer, and I'll say, if not, please explain. Okay, so this one is not going to be required because if the controls were easy to use, they don't need to put anything in here. So we'll start with the controls. And then the next thing I want to know, so I'm going to add another question. So say, was the goal of the game clear? So I want to know if they understood what they're supposed to be doing. So let's add these in. And we'll just leave this as a yes, no, and we'll make this required. So we want to kind of understand, does the player know what they're supposed to be doing? Is it clear how to play the game? Okay, another thing we might be curious about is playtime. If you're making a game and you think it should take like 5 minutes, but it takes like an hour, that's probably a sign that your design choices might not be working the way you think they are. If you think it's supposed to take an hour and it only takes 5 minutes, that's a sign that your design choices aren't working in a different way. So we can ask about playtime. So let's say, how long did you play the level? We're just testing a level right now, so let's make sure we use... we're not testing a whole game, so we want to just be clear, testing a level. Okay, so how long did you play the level? And then you can give options based on what you think is reasonable. So my level barely has anything in it, so I'll say like less than 1 minute. And then maybe, oh no, I don't want other, I want option. 1 to 5 minutes, greater than 5 minutes. I really doubt that there'll be much variation in there, but that'll give kind of a range, so we'll get a sense of how long it takes to play. I'll set that to required. That's what your results might look like. So then we may want to test for the difficulty. At this point, our levels probably aren't that difficult, but it's a good thing to kind of get a sense of if people are having a hard time playing the level. So we can rate difficulty. This is a good thing to use a linear scale. So we could say rate the level difficulty. And for this one, you may not you may want the game to be difficult. So if there's a lot of difficult ratings, that might be a good sign. But if you don't want it to be difficult and people say that it's difficult, then you'll know that it's not quite in line with what you're going for. So let's label these. Let's say least difficult, most difficult. And we'll make that a required question. So when we're interpreting this data, one thing we want to keep in mind, we want to not bring any expectations to what the users are telling us. So we don't want to assume that all of our users are expert gamers. We also don't want to assume that they've never played a video game before. We have to just kind of take what they say as their experience. A lot of time, especially if you get feedback that doesn't sort of match what you expect or what you want from your game, there's this tendency to kind of blame the tester and say like, oh, they just don't know what they're doing. But we want to make sure that we kind of just interpret their feedback in a neutral way. So we've looked at a bunch of examples of quantitative feedback. This is anything that uses a number or scale, something that can be divided into like this many people chose this option and this many people chose another option. So things that look like bar charts or pie charts. But we also want to give a chance for some qualitative feedback. This is for people to describe their experience of the game. So let's add one more question here at the bottom. And so let's just say, describe any other thoughts you have about the level. And Google is guessing that that's a paragraph, so we can leave that as a paragraph. And so now we've got a decent testing form. Let's take a look at it with the preview so we can make sure it looks good. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to add a link here to the level. So people can access it if they need to. So I'll say play my level here. And then I'm going to go over to my itch page and just get a link to here. Oh, this is an older game. I feel like this should be at the top. Huh. Let's see. Okay, there we see it. I don't know why it's... Okay. I should add the thumbnail. That'll make it a lot easier to see. Okay, so here's the game. So I'm going to copy this and put a link in there. And then I'm also going to add a link to this form into the itch page. So I'm going to click on send and go to link. I'm going to shorten this URL and copy. And then I'll go to the itch page and just edit and put this in the description. So I'll say, use my form to give me some feedback. So I'll link to the form there, click save. Okay, so now they kind of link to each other so you can go back and forth. Okay, so that's everything we need to do to have, to be set up for user testing. So we'll take some time in class now so that you guys can get everything ready. And then we'll start our user testing session at 4 o'clock. So we'll have some workshop time now for you guys to, export your builds if you need to and update your itch page. And then at 4, we'll have some dedicated time for user testing. You guys can play each other's levels and give some feedback. And then, however long that takes, we'll have some more workshop time after that to wrap up. And I guess I'll go over submitting the first assignment as well, but it's pretty straightforward. To share these, what's the easiest way to do that? We can use Discord, or we can use, let's just use Discord. So once you have your form set up, you can log on to the Discord. So you can link to either one as long as you have the links there. I guess I'll link to this itch page. And then go to our MEA Discord and the MEA 300 channel and just paste your game in here. So that'll make it easy to access. If you need a link to the Discord, I can generate one. Let me go ahead and do that. I'll post this on Blackboard. So you don't need this if you're already on the Discord, but I'll just put this in here in case you need it. Okay, so let's stop there.